All right, everyone. Welcome back to all my listeners. This is episode 13 in season 14. Today is Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. All right, you guys, it is the very last Wednesday of the month of March, and you know what today is all about. It's going to feature my newsworthy fraud, waste, and abuse highlights. And of course, I'm going to be spotlighting some of those from the month's civil and criminal enforcement cases that I find newsworthy. And in my trusty tip, I'm going to focus on the latest updates in our CPT coding manuals. There has been a new Errata and technical corrections document that was just issued. So I wanted to try and unpack some of those details. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and round out and close out today's episode with another remarkable quote on change by Aristotle. All right, you guys, let's get into it. So today's newsworthy, again, the month's fraud, waste, and abuse cases. The month of March saw a whopping 53 cases as of the recording of this episode. So let's go ahead and check out some of the cases that I've spotlighted. Early March saw a medical billing company owner sentenced for healthcare fraud. A New York man was sentenced to 1 year of probation and ordered to pay upwards of $34,000 in restitution for healthcare fraud. As part of his guilty plea, the man admitted that from approximately April 2020 through April 2023, he acted as the office manager and healthcare claims biller for 2 physicians' practices through a company that he formed called SJ Healthcare Management Services, LLC, or SJHMS. Now, SJHMS charged a fixed monthly fee under which he performed various management, administrative, and billing services for the 2 practices. Now, he admitted that he had submitted false and fraudulent claims to public and private insurers on behalf of those 2 practices for services that in some instances were never provided and in other instances were provided at lower reimbursement rates than the amounts billed. For example, he admitted that he submitted claims to insurers for medical procedures that were purportedly performed by a provider on him, but which, in fact, never occurred. Let's move on. Early March also saw a Lake Charles physician and his wife and their clinic agreeing to pay Medicare for improper billing related to implanted neurostimulators. That's right, my very favorite, implanted neurostimulators. Here we go. Now, this doctor and his wife, who was also the co-founder with him of this Lake Charles, Louisiana medical clinic called Infinite Health Integrative Medical Center, let's just call it Infinite Health, they've all agreed to pay $450,000 to resolve liability under the False Claims Act for the alleged improper billing of P-STIM devices. From November of 2018 through April of 2020, they billed Medicare for implanted neurostimulators that required a surgical procedure in which the physician places wires that deliver stimulation to the epidural space on the spinal cord. This procedure must be performed in a surgery center, but the doctor did not perform surgery. Instead, these P-STIM devices were applied in his office to his patient's ears. P-STIM is an electric acupuncture device that is affixed behind a patient's ear using an adhesive. Needles are inserted into the patient's ear and affixed using another adhesive. Once activated, the device then provides intermittent stimulation by electrical pulses. It is a single-use, battery-powered device designed to be worn for approximately 4 days until its battery runs out, at which time the device is thrown away. Medicare does not reimburse for acupuncture or for these devices, such as P-STIM, nor does Medicare reimburse for P-STIM as a neurostimulator or as implantation of neurostimulator electrodes. Now, early March saw an owner of marketing companies and DME company convicted for his role in a $100 million scheme to defraud Medicare and other insurers and to violate the anti-kickback statute. Now, this Florida man was convicted by a federal jury for his role in a durable medical equipment, our DME, kickback scheme that caused millions of dollars in losses to Medicare and other insurance providers. Following a month-long jury trial, this man was convicted of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud, 1 count of healthcare fraud, conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback statute, and 3 counts of violating the anti-kickback statute. He was also acquitted of 2 counts of healthcare fraud. Now, according to the evidence presented at trial, the man and his co-conspirators purchased lists of Medicare patients' names, addresses, and phone numbers, and hired telemarketers to convince the patients to get DME, orthotic braces in particular. These telemarketers pre-filled prescriptions and picked the highest paying braces to bill to insurers. He then paid telemedicine doctors to sign the pre-filled prescriptions for braces, regardless of whether the patients needed or wanted braces. Generally, the telemedicine doctor did not even speak to the patients before signing the pre-filled prescriptions. The man then sold the signed prescriptions to DME supply companies that could bill Medicare, TRICARE, and other insurers for the braces. To conceal the fraud, he and his co-conspirators signed sham contracts and used sham invoices that falsely represented that the man was billing DME supply companies for marketing or consulting. The man also owned and operated a DME supply company that was used to bill Medicare, and which submitted claims to Medicare for up to 9 braces for a single patient. To further conceal his illegal conduct, he put multiple of his businesses in the names of nominee owners. The nominee owners generally performed no legitimate work for any company and were paid to hide the man's involvement. Medicare and other insurers paid hundreds of millions of dollars to members of the conspiracy and paid at least approximately $100 million for DME associated with the man's companies. He personally pocketed more than $10 million in fraud proceeds. Conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud is punishable by a maximum potential penalty of 20 years in prison. Healthcare fraud is punishable by a maximum potential penalty of 10 years in prison. Conspiracy to violate the federal anti-kickback statute is punishable by a maximum potential penalty of 5 years in prison. Each count of illegal kickbacks is punishable by a maximum potential penalty of 10 years in prison. Each count is also punishable by a fine. Sentencing is scheduled for July 29th, 2025. All right, let's move on. Mid-March. Mid-March saw Robert Burkich, MD, settling a case alleging that he submitted false claims for chelation therapy to Medicare. Now, this doctor and his practice have settled claims under the False Claims Act to resolve allegations that they knowingly submitted false claims to Medicare for medically unnecessary chelation therapy. Now, many years ago, I audited a practice that was performing chelation therapy. So as I found this particular case, I had a case of my own PTSD from reviewing documentation of chelation therapy services from years ago. So I was having some flashbacks. So let me continue. Now, the United States alleges that between September 2009 and January 2017, the doctor billed Medicare for administering the chelation drug edetate calcium disodium, or EDTA, to Medicare beneficiaries who were not suffering from lead poisoning. Now, this particular chelation drug, again, EDTA, that edetate calcium disodium, EDTA, is a rarely used drug that is indicated for use only in individuals suffering from lead poisoning and lead encephalopathy. Now, Medicare has several long-standing rules preventing reimbursement for EDTA when not used for cases of lead poisoning or lead encephalopathy. The United States alleges that he falsely represented to Medicare that his patients suffered from lead poisoning or other heavy metal-related diseases to avoid Medicare's restrictions and obtain reimbursement. The claims resolved by the settlement here are allegations only, and there has been no determination of liability. Late March also saw 2 California doctors agreeing to settlements totaling $375,000 to resolve allegations of fraud schemes related to, wait for it, electroacupuncture devices. So we're still going strong against all of these various Styvax and P-stim electroacupuncture devices throughout the nation. So let's move on. The first doctor has paid in this case. So again, those 2 California doctors agreed to settlements totaling $375,000 to resolve allegations of fraud schemes related to electroacupuncture devices. The first doctor has paid $290,000 to the United States, while the second doctor has agreed to pay $85,000 to the United States to resolve allegations arising from a fraud scheme that caused the submission of hundreds of false claims to Medicare. Both of the settlements relate to a fraud scheme orchestrated by a Riverside County chiropractor. The chiropractor used various companies he owned to seek and receive reimbursement from Medicare for surgically implanted neurostimulators at multiple locations within and beyond California, even though the companies did not perform surgery or implant neurostimulators. In a prior settlement with the United States, the chiropractor stipulated that he and his companies instead taped a disposable electroacupuncture device called Styvax to their patients' ears. Styvax devices do not require surgical implantation and are not reimbursable by Medicare. The United States alleges that this scheme violated the False Claims Act and the anti-kickback statute. Now, with respect to this particular settlement with the first doctor, the United States has alleged that he solicited and received unlawful kickbacks from the chiropractor in return for the doctor referring his patients back to the chiropractor for the furnishing of Styvax devices paid for by Medicare. The settlement with the second doctor resolves allegations that his 2 companies, which he in fact co-owned with the chiropractor, submitted false claims to Medicare for surgically implanted neurostimulators. All right, you guys, it's time for my trusty tip. Now, we know that our CPT coding manual for 2025 was just put into effect, right, on January 1st, just a few months ago. But as we know, from time to time throughout the year, the AMA, that's our American Medical Association, they are the ones that publish CPT coding books. They also are the ones that publish, those documents are called errata and technical corrections. So those errata and technical corrections come out usually in March, again in around September, anytime they come across an error that they would like to quickly fix for the community. So those types of documents are rich and robust. I've viewed, I don't know how many over these years, but I wanted to make mention of that in today's trusty tip, that there was another big juicy document that was published just a couple of weeks ago on March 14th by the AMA. Now, it's important that you make these changes, these errata and technical corrections in your coding books or make notes next to your coding books, however you like to function in your day-to-day work, because, in fact, all of this errata and technical corrections are going to be effective as of January 1st, 2025. So they will go ahead and backdate all of these technical corrections, and they will be made effective January 1st. So we're already late in the game, technically speaking, right? So some of the technical corrections are found in the telemedicine and non-face-to-face services table in the evaluation and management telemedicine services subsection for interprofessional telephone, internet, EHR consultation code, which is our CPT code 99452. And they instruct us to change the other E&M notation from, quote, no in-person encounter within 14 days, end quote, to something new, quote, do not report with same day E&M, end quote. So make a note of that in your CPT coding book for the CPT code 99452. Now, the Errata and technical corrections document goes on. Throughout the synchronous audio only evaluation and management services subsection for established patients in the CPT code range of 98012 through 98015, they tell us to go ahead and delete the new exclusionary parenthetical notes that appear under each of those codes. So they've identified that correction that needs to be made, that deletion that needs to be made. Again, for those CPT codes 98012 through 98015. Then, moving on, it talks about revise the exclusionary parenthetical note following prolonged E&M services add-on code 99359. And they tell us to revise it to include the word add code range 98000 through 98016 to the list of codes you cannot report with prolonged services. Now, this goes on and on. There are so many more revisions throughout the E&M section to add or delete reference to the new telemedicine codes. Again, CPT code 98000 through 98015, and new brief communication technology-based code, that's our CPT code 98016, in applicable guidelines and parenthetical notes. Again, right, because that whole section for telemedicine was brand new, effective in January 2025. So all of that is brand new, and they're already finding technical corrections that need to be made. So please make sure you do so. Now, references to these codes are added to other sections of CPT as well. For example, in the medicine section, in the 90,000 range, you are instructed to revise the guideline in the psychiatry subsection to include the code range of 98000 through 98016 to the list of services that may be reported with these types of psychiatry services. So make sure you flip through your book to add these technical corrections as well in the medicine section. And I also noted so many more subsections of our CPT book that you should be paying close attention to in this errata and technical correction document. Because also in the evaluation and management newborn care subsection, you should be revising that to include that code range, as well as in the evaluation and management advanced care planning subsection. Now, the technical corrections go on and on and on for about 22 PDF pages. So be sure you review this document thoroughly that was issued by the AMA and implement those changes in pen, in pencil, in your CPT coding book that was just issued for January 2025. There's so many rich technical corrections that they have made throughout the entire CPT code book. Lots of sections are affected. So if you happen to be coding for these types of specialties, please make sure you take notes because everything is effective January 1st, 2025. And finally, I focus season 14 Spark on change. I want this 14th season Spark to be filled with our world's thought leaders, writers, artists, philosophers, everyone whose words provide us with insights and wisdom on change. So in this week's inspiring quote in Spark is from Aristotle. Courage is the virtue that makes all others possible. So very true, right? This quote reminds us that without courage, how can we change for the better? Without courage, how can we strive to make change happen? This quote quietly reminds us what is needed to make an impact. I'm happy Aristotle's spark still burns brightly and still inspires so very many. All right, you guys, that wraps up today's episode. So it's the very last one for the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed the very special episode today on my favorite fraud, waste, and abuse, as well as all of these new technical corrections and errata. There were so very many in this 22-page document. So really take the time to review. I'm sure I'll be spotlighting another new CPT code in the next episodes for the month of April, because I know I've got so many CPT codes to touch on for my audience that are brand new. So anyways, you guys, I wish you all amazing week ahead. And I hope you guys have a lot of good things in store for the month of April. So I wish you guys all a good, fun time as well. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening on today's episode. And I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.